Welcome everybody. So it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Gustav, who is a senior lecturer in data science at the University of New South Wales, Sydney. He's in with the School of Mathematics and Statistics. His primary research area includes Bayesian deep learning, neuroevaluation, ensemble learning, data augmentation, basically encompassing many areas of AI. And he works in several application areas, applying the AI methods in different areas. So now I welcome Dr. Chandra to present this talk today.
Thanks, Sachin, for a wonderful introduction. Thanks everyone for coming. So sorry about being a bit late. So the overview for today's talk, I'll first talk about basics of language modeling with deep learning and introduce the Hindu texts, the Bhagavad Gita and the Upanishads, which most of you may be familiar with already, and talk about sentiment analysis of the Bhagavad Gita, topic modeling, like where I compare the Bhagavad Gita and the Upanishads, and talk about Google. All right. Google Translate and post evaluation of language models and the future plans for this theme of work that I do. So what is sentiment analysis? Is quite simple. About bringing about recognizing emotions, human emotions in language, and it's applicable to a wide range of problems in areas, and it spans areas in text analysis, computational linguistics, and biometrics. And basically, it's all about using language models to identify, extract, quantify, and study affective states, such as the emotions. And sentiment analysis is quite popular in social media for marketing, customer reviews, and surveys, and various other applications such as medicine and public health. So going back to sentiment analysis, there's a lot of future scope for research in sentiment analysis. For example, it could be also used to monitor online chats, which is not being done at the moment in social media. So that, and also chatbots where you have discussing things with customers. So at times we have things where customers become aggressive, and then the people who serve the customers, they don't know what to do. So sentiment analysis can be a tool to guide people in controlling public behavior or in responding to unusual remarks at times as well. So sentiment analysis is a very powerful tool. Sometimes even in chatbots, people get when they're chatting with their friends, they get upset. And imagine having a guide in the chat box which is using sentiment analysis to monitor you or to calm you down, telling you that, hey, this is time for you to stop. So it can be used in a lot of things which are not really there, and but it can be developed. So topic modeling, basically topic and modeling, the phrase itself self-explainable. You want to understand and model emerging topics in discussions, in texts, and in a collection of documents. And the idea it uses it is using tools to discover hidden and semantic structures in a body of a text. And a document contains multiple topics in different proportions, and document can be such as a newspaper, it can be a novel, it could be a textbook. And there's challenges for natural language processing given the ambiguity of expressions. So this becomes more and more complex when we are looking at documents that are more philosophical in nature or expressed in sort of poems. And this is basically the scope of this talk. which is we're looking at very specific documents which are religious and philosophical in nature, written thousands of years. So many generations have passed, so many societies have changed, and yet there are the things that we need to decipher. And also this becomes a problem, topic modeling and sentiment analysis, when documents are translated from one language into the other. Are the sentiments maintained? Are the topics maintained? And these are some of the reasons, the challenges basically motivated us to look into this. But in day-to-day activities, we have Twitter and social media where we express a lot of things these days. And there too, the expressions change. You use a series of emojis, there's memes and so on, and expressions and abbreviations. And these change every few years. So it's not just a problem. The challenge is in topic modeling when it comes to ancient texts or translated texts, but also in social media or current day. So it is important, it's very useful for topic modeling to be applied to social media so that we can understand public behavior during events such as elections or pandemics. And it is also used for marketing and advertising. So this is basically the basics of topic modeling and social media and sentiment analysis. The tools these days for natural language processing, when you talk about language processing with deep learning, the major tool is deep learning models, and recurrent neural networks are prominent deep learning models.
Maybe some methods for your mobile.
No. So recurrent neural networks, basically compared to feed-forward neural networks, which are prominent, which are the foundations of deep learning, basically. Recurrent neural networks maintain information about past states, and basically we don't, in order to make decisions about the future, it's not about just looking at information in the past, but also the present and how. And this is important in natural language processing. So recurrent neural networks are prominent in natural language processing because they have the ability to model temporal sequences and dynamical systems. And they can be used to model past information. So preserve past information. And the problem in recurrent neural networks earlier in the days was the vanishing gradient problem. This is about training recurrent neural networks in the early 90s. And the vanishing gradient problem posed challenges in training recurrent neural networks, and hence LSTM, long short-term memory recurrent neural networks, were developed to address the vanishing gradient problem with a series of cells and gates, basically having better memory structures in the context states of the recurrent neural network. And that addressed the long short-term memory problem. LSTMs can be used for language modeling, for such as tasks where you, when you are typing, what is the as a word is being typed, what is the next letter in the word, and what is the next word in a sentence, and so on. And these things are quite common if you look at the Google browser, Chrome, and you go to the google.com. When you're searching for something, you type, and then there's always something recommending you. So that's basically recurrent neural network recommending you an example. And transformers are basically enhanced recurrent neural networks. They're built using LSTM model, and further there's a mechanism, attention mechanism, to improve the LSTM model for large and complex language tasks. And the idea of attention, it's basically motivated by cognitive attention that we have as humans or animals have, and where we basically enhance a focus on certain parts and of data or information, and where we ignore the other parts. So attention is natural, and built on transformers use the encoder decoder architecture, and it's used mostly for NLP tasks. And in conventional comparison to conventional RNNs, transformers do not require data to be processed in a sequential order, since the attention operation provides context for any position in the input sequence. And the transformer is quite a complex model with a lot of parameters when you compare it with the LSTM. And as you can see that there's a series of additional components in a transformer model. You have multi-head attention, mask, multi-head attention, and you have feed-forward operation, and finally you have the softmax and output probabilities. And when you look into the multi-head attention, you see scale dot product attention, and when you look into the scale dot product attention, you have this. So it's quite a complex architecture. And then imagine having that complex architecture and tooth, and the English language Wikipedia with 2,500 million words, and training it. And that's what is BERT. So BERT is bidirectional encoder representation from transformers. It's basically a pre-trained model, and there are a number of pre-trained language models, and BERT is one of the first ones that came out there. And basically it's developed by Google, and parts of BERT model are free to download. The BERT base, which is based using 12 encoders, 12 bidirectional self-attention heads. Now these terms become familiar, as you know that it's built using transformers, and transformers are based on encoder-decoder network, which uses attention. So that's what is basically the basic of the foundation of BERT. And furthermore, like you have, when you're looking at natural language processing, you know that you're dealing with text, and text, you cannot just present them as input to neural networks or models. You need some way where you preserve or you convert a text into some kind of a real vector, and that is known as a word embedding. And word2vec, which is a neural network based model, and global vector embedding. These are some popular strategies to convert text to word embeddings. And then from those word embeddings, you train a recurrent neural network or a BERT or transformer type model. But note that in the BERT model, you basically have, it's a pre-trained model that is large, and it is trained on lots of huge corpus, right? But you can take that model, and then you can take a data set, and basically that data set, it's a pre-trained model, then you fine tune the pre-trained model. That's what BERT is. So for example, we use BERT for COVID-19 sentiment analysis for data set for the first wave of COVID-19 in India. And basically in there, the data set, we had a training data set where there were 10 emotions, sentiments, and a multi-level data set, which was labeled by experts. And then we took the BERT model, the BERT-based model, and then we fine-tuned the BERT-based model using the training data set. That was the data from worldwide. And then after the model was fine-tuned, then we used it to apply to the case of COVID-19 sentiment analysis in India. So that's one of the examples of how BERT can be used. And that is our key, the first paper that we did in 2021. And that's how I kind of moved into natural language processing. So I don't want to make big claims. I am very much new to the field, yes, and I am more of an applied language, natural language processing guy. And whenever I go to groups where there's heavy natural language processing, I'm a bit cautious. Uh, but I would like to get into more of the theoretical and foundations of natural language processing, the other bigger challenges, and especially with your school. So that's all to do with BERT and a bit of context in terms of how I got into natural language processing. My focus was more about applying the latest NLP models to the latest problems. And then there are problems that are there in the past. So, this is about the analysis of Hindu texts, right? So this is a land of, India is a land of spirituality, culture, and religion. World's oldest religions emerged from India, and gave birth to four major religions. So one of them being Hinduism, and the Bhagavad Gita is the central text of Hinduism. And the image that you see here is something that you must all be familiar with, as this is about the history of India in a certain time zone around 5,000 years ago, when there was a massive battle known as the Mahabharata, the era of the Mahabharata, or the Great India, Great Bharat, where Arjuna had to go on to war with facing his close family members on the other side. And Lord Krishna, being his mentor, was the charioteer of the war, taking him to war. And then there came a part where he had to decide whether to go to war or not, whether to kill his close family members opposing him and his army. And that basically is what is the situation conveyed in the Bhagavad Gita. But that situation was used basically by Lord Krishna to explain to Arjuna about Hindu philosophy, which has the prominent themes such as dharma, karma, and karma, and the definitions of different types of karma, and so on. And the Bhagavad Gita is a key text in Hindu philosophy, because when comparing to other religions, it's not just one text we are dealing with here. We have a library of texts. So India needed one. India basically at that time had a library of texts, and even now, but people do not have the time. We are all busy with things. So there was a need for one text basically. And that's what is the Bhagavad Gita. And that's Lord Krishna's contribution to humanity, where you don't have to study the whole library of texts, but if you just understand one text and that situation. And the situation that was presented there in the Bhagavad Gita was a situation, not like every day we do not go to war, but we do every now and then go to situations where we have to stand in front of people whom we love, whom we admire, and challenge them. And sometimes as educators, we have to counsel students. Sometimes as students, you have to question your professors, right? So there's many examples where there are conflicting situations which you do not want to face, but then you have to face it. And that's where you need philosophy, you need direction in how to approach that. And so that's basically the Bhagavad Gita with karma and dharma, or more translated, loosely translated as ethics and philosophy of action. You can set the foundation for dealing with everyday problems. So I guess I have explained all this, and about the Bhagavad Gita. But the other thing is that in the last 2 centuries, there have been a lot of interest in Hindu philosophy by Western scholars. The Bhagavad Gita and the Vedas and a number of texts were first translated into German actually. The German scholars, Max Muller and the rest, so took a lot of interest in the Vedic text, and they translated these texts back, and they also gave some timelines of how these texts were written. Like, so if you just search Bhagavad Gita or the Rig Veda, in Wikipedia, you will have some rough timeline of when they were written. But now people are questioning how did those timeline came about? But then there's no answers because those people who gave the timeline, they are no more. And they were even questioned when they were alive. They were like, oh, we just gave an estimate based on this and that. So one of the major problems for giving the timeline was because these people who studied the Hindu religion and culture, they believed as well that the universe is only 6,000 years old because that was the Judeo-Abrahamic tradition, right? So giving any timeline beyond that age was kind of seen as something that you shouldn't do, right? Like if the universe is only 6,000 years old, how can the Indus Valley civilization or the Saraswati civilization be 10,000 years old, right? And you're contradicting yourself. So that is also, there was political, issue in there. And this is some of these texts being translated to the West. They were done at the time when the British were, before the British were in power, actually, when the East Indian Company was in power and they were trying to have dominance. And at that time, there was a massive movement of the missionaries to convert people as well. So there was all this biasness in the translations. And so we need to kind of study, challenge the timelines and see any biases that come along. And based on these things, I'm very much motivated to do the research in this area. So this is basically the climax of the Bhagavad Gita, where the Virat Rup, or the great or the cosmic presence, cosmic consciousness of Lord Krishna is expressed and revealed to Arjuna, right? So note that this Virat Rup, the Bhagavad Gita, a lot of themes in there are very symbolic. And we, like when we look at each other, we just see our physical appearance, right? We do not see our mental or consciousness, we don't see that. We do not see our thoughts, right? And Virat Rup is like beyond something. Like you have Lord Krishna, who's like a human being, but it's believed that he is the incarnation of super consciousness or cosmic consciousness known as Lord Vishnu. So it's beyond all these descriptions of the Virat Rup, and the visuals are all artists' perception of how it can be expressed. But what was actually there is beyond something that can be written and expressed, right? So that's basically the bit of a background of the Bhagavad Gita. And with these motivations, we compare three selected translations of the Bhagavad Gita using semantic and sentiment analysis. So we choose certain, there's like hundreds and thousands of translations, hundreds at least in the last 200 years, couple of hundred, but we choose some prominent ones. And this is based on our biasness, certain biasness. And one is Bhagavad Gita by Mahatma Gandhi. And why we have Mahadev Desai is because Bhagavad Gita by Mahatma Gandhi, that's when Mahatma Gandhi ji translated the Bhagavad Gita in prison and from Sanskrit to Gujarati, and he wrote a commentary about it. And then Mahadev Desai translated that translation and commentary into English, basically. So this is a specific case where you have not a direct but an indirect translation. We have two stage. Then we have by Eknath Eshwaran ji, who translated directly from Sanskrit to English. And Eknath Eshwaran was a professor in Sanskrit and Hindu philosophy, and he lived later part of his life in America, in California. And then Shri Purohit Swami translated directly from English to Sanskrit to English. And the other thing is, the reason we've taken these is because of the timeline. You see, one is 1935, 1946, 1985. So it's like various different decades here that we're looking at. And some of the key parts of the Bhagavad Gita, it is desire It is aversion, born of passion. Desire consumes and corrupts everything. It is man's greatest enemy. As fire is shrouded in smoke, a mirror by dust, and a child by the womb, so is the universe involved in desire. It walks through the senses, the mind, and the reason, and with their help destroys wisdom and confounds the soul. Therefore, O Arjuna, first control thy senses and then slay desire, for it is full of sin and it is the destroyer of knowledge and of wisdom. So if you haven't read the Bhagavad Gita or heard anything about it, this basically, the passage itself kind of talks and reveals how philosophical it is. And this is the one by Shri Purohit Swami, but you see the translation by Shri Mahatma Gandhi. It is lust, it is wrath born of the gunas rajas. So you can see, you can compare that. First he's talking about desire, Shri Purohit Swami, but whereas Mahatma Gandhi says it is lust. So that is the difference in the words they have used with different decades of translation timeline. And then you have Mahatma Gandhi ji, which is using the Sanskrit word rajas, whereas here is saying passion. So, and then it is the arch devourer, the arch sinner, known as the man's enemy here. His fire is obscured by smoke, a mirror by dirt, and the embryo by the eminion. So is knowledge obscured by this. Knowledge is obscured, or contania, by this eternal enemy of the wise man in the form of lust, the insatiable fire. So that's the difference in the translations. Our goal is to basically compare the different translations verse by verse and use semantic and sentiment analysis in the comparison. That is the first project that we did in this area. So, and there are more examples. It is not possible to attain self-realization if a man does not know how to control himself, but for him who striving by poor means learns such control, it is possible. Without self-restrained yoga, a hold is difficult to attain, but the self-governed soul can attain it by proper means if he strives for it. Mahatma Gandhi ji. So you can see the words are quite different, but the meaning is somewhat similar. So the technical bits, you guys are all from computer science, so you know how difficult it can be. You know, writing a lot of NLP is basically pre-processing. So, and thanks to Venkatesh, who is from, I believe, IIT Guwahati, is working now, and he was an intern for this project, and he did this part where he downloaded and converted the PDF, pre-processed. And so we have the sentiment analysis and semantic analysis. Then we have all this multi-level classification. Note that there's a lot of limitations in this work, and there's bias, and the limitation and bias I just say now. One of them is that we are using the BERT model, which is using the present day Wikipedia, right? So that type of biasness is there with the present day Wikipedia language, how it's written, right? In terms of context, contextual awareness and things. And then we are fine-tuning it with language, a COVID-19 sentiment analysis dataset called the SendWave dataset, right? And which has 10 sentiments, which are multi-level sentiments, but they were basically leveled by 50 experts, 10,000 tweets. But this is the first time we have such a large data set labeled with so many sentiments. So we're like, okay, right, let's take advantage of this. And in NLP, when there's something labeled of this nature, you better take advantage of that, right? So that's the part there. And then we have used this model of the style of words expressed from Twitter and the sentiments from there. But at the end of the day, we note that the sentiments, irrespective of the language, the model needs to capture the sentiments irrespective of the language. And that's what we hope that it will do. So with it, we then have sentence embedding models to do vest similarity, and then we have keyword extraction and we analysis. The prediction. So in the text pre-processing, we have original sentence, and then you have transform sentence, because the different translations, you will notice that use different names for Lord Krishna and Arjuna based on their preferences. And both Arjuna and Krishna had dozens of names. Sure, there's more analysis on that. So we need to basically bring them in the same workspace so that we can compare them more efficiently. So the basics, you use bigrams and trigrams when it comes to any text to see what sorts of similarities are there. And we have optimistic sentiments and pessimistic sentiments, the bigrams and trigrams, supreme goal, every creature, optimistic life, supreme goal, without doubt, self-sacrifice giving. And then we have divine action, tamas, three worlds, sons of Dhritarashtra. And that's
These diagrams and diagrams are from the sentences, the verses which are identified as optimistic and pessimistic.
yes. So and then we have basically the three translations, and then we are just comparing the different sentiments expressed across the three translations. So you see that, like, surprise, you have Eknath Eshwaran, whereas has less compared to Mahatma Gandhi ji and Shri Purohit Swami. So, but it's not really drastically that different. The other part that is interesting is that we look at, because it's a multi-level classification, so there can be 2 or 3 expressions, sentiments expressed at once in a sentence or in a verse. So we just look at the first two combinations of sentiments. So somebody can be anxious and optimistic, or optimistic and joking, thankful and joking, or thankful and surprised, those type of combinations. So we see that we have optimistic and thankful, and optimistic and joking as 2 of the major sentiments that are expressed in this Eknath Eshwaran's version, whereas the major one here, the other 2 are surprised and annoyed. But we see in Mahatma Gandhi's version, we also have them, but they are not the same number compared to them, but they are in a similar order. Basically, you have in this one, you have surprise by Mahatma Gandhi, which is the highest, but as well as Eknath Eshwaran, optimistic and surprise is the highest. So similar combinations are there. The numbers are different, but the ordering is very similar, or almost the same. And we go by chapter, and we see this trend of basically the trend is that in most of them they are somewhat similar. And note that the joking is basically, it doesn't mean like somebody cracking a joke. It's basically something to express humor, and in our COVID-19 data set, that was the term used to express humor. So is there a humor in the Bhagavad Gita? That's a good question. And so we can see some examples of that, and joking, and there's some humor and optimistic. But those who overcome the impulses of lust and anger which arise in the body are made whole and live in joy. So Mahatma Gandhi's version is the man who is able, even here on earth, before he is released from the body, to hold out against the flood tide of lust and wrath. He is a yogi, he is happy. It's quite a quite different in the way they are saying things, but we see that the model has captured them as the same in all three of them. Whereas in some of them, it's just here is joking, whereas this is joking and surprise. And in here you have joking, anxious, and annoyed, whereas in here it's joking. All are rushing into your awful jaws. I see some of them crushed by your teeth. So, I mean, you can see the way he is conveyed it. It could be seen as some sort of humor, there. Are hastening into the fearful jaws of your terrible mouth. Some indeed caught between your teeth are seen in their heads being crushed to atoms. I see them all rushing headlong into your mouths with terrible tusks, horrible to behold. Some are mangled between your jaws with their heads crushed to atoms. So I think some of you may be knowing what this actual verse is. This is when Lord Krishna shows his Virat Rupa to Arjuna, and then there's in the Virat Rupa, if you've seen the Mahabharata by the TV series by B.R. Chopra, it shows the visualization of the Virat Rupa, and in there is like one of the incarnations, all the incarnations are next to each other, and one of them is basically uh, humans are born, and in the other, the humans go into the mouth. So basically that is basically expressed here, that whole cycle of births and deaths, basically. This is the interesting part where Arjuna's sentiments over time, the chapters, it changes. And we know this is something that happens in therapy sessions, in counseling sessions as well. When you go to a counselor, or in the beginning, you will be showing a lot of negative emotions and sentiments, right? And mentioned negative topics. And over time, when the counselor is talking to you, you can become positive. That's a good counseling session, but that can take weeks to months, right? And this is the Bhagavad Gita is also seen as a text of psychology and counseling. Actually, that's what Lord Arjuna is doing. Lord Krishna is doing to Arjuna. And in the beginning, you see Arjuna's sentiments were quite negative, and then over time it became positive and neutralized. And here we see Lord Krishna too. In the beginning, he was positive, then negative, and then neutral, and then more positive and neutral, and so on. So it all depends on the different chapters and the issues that were discussed. If you have read the Bhagavad Gita or seen the series about it, you would notice how difficult some of the arguments became, and it was like more of a very strong intellectual debate between Lord Krishna and Arjuna, because Arjuna, Lord Krishna explains to him about philosophy of karma and dharma, and then Arjuna is like, oh, that is good. I'm just going to be a monk and I don't want to fight this war, So then Lord Krishna has the challenge to now explain to him in such a way that he does not escape from his duty. If Arjuna had escaped from his duty, they would not win the Mahabharata war. And basically that was, it would imply that evil has won. So that the Mahabharata war was good over evil. Of course, both sides had some bad and good, but the overall good over evil of the two sides. So what was Arjuna fighting for? He was fighting the right to land, the right to the throne for his brothers, and then most importantly, women rights, where Draupadi was humiliated by the Kauravas, right, by Duryodhan. So these things, this is the major goal of the war. And if they lost that, they would have basically, it would have set a wrong precedent in history. So in terms of the comparison of the translations with statistical measures, diagrams, trigrams, we found major differences in the translations, no doubt. The translations are major differences when it comes to words expressed, right, in the bigrams and trigrams. And due to the nature of Sanskrit language and the fact that the Bhagavad Gita is a song with rhythm and rhyme, it's not surprising that these things can happen. And different translators have different, biases and different time zones, timelines, decades they translated it. So, and that's and the use of archaic words and so on too in these translations, the different names of the protagonists, and so on. Those were the major differences. And in terms of sentiment analysis, we found that although the language and vocabulary is different, the model has been able to recognize the sentiments mostly similar, given different chapters and respective translations. And sentiments such as optimistic, annoyed, and surprised have been but the most expressed, while the model also considered a significant number of verses as joking or some level of humor expressed. And the sentiment polarity of Lord Krishna and Arjuna changes over time, where Lord Krishna, whereas Arjuna becomes negative, from negative to positive over time. And semantic analysis showed that the meaning conveyed across different translations was similar, although different language and vocabulary were used. More results about this are in the paper itself. It's published in IEEE Access. The topic modeling project, we wanted to compare the Bhagavad Gita with the Upanishads. So now you have a good understanding of the Bhagavad Gita. Now moving into the Upanishads. The Upanishads are a series of collected texts, thousands of years in history. And basically, Upanishad literally means at the feet of the master. And this is what the Upanishad actually means. At the feet of the master, at the feet of the guru, you basically get some deep, you have a deep conversation, and you get counseled or you get guidance about your life and about general questions that you have about philosophy of existence. And this was a culture, has been a culture of India for thousands of years, where seekers were going to the forests. There were ancient university systems in India for thousands of years, Nalanda and all the way older than those. But beyond them and before that, the Upanishads were written much before the oldest universities in India, known universities. And this is when, or during then, there were questions that were unanswered in the university system, you can imagine, or in the Gurukul system. And then people were going to the forest to ask answers. And the people who were in the forest were not just everyday people. These were people who sacrificed their life, their career, their family, and they went to find some deep answers about the meaning of life and existence, the philosophers. And there are around 108 Upanishads, and a lot of them were lost. And note that I've said this before, that the texts come from a library, and the Upanishads are by also the Western philosophers is recognized as the oldest philosophical text in the world. It predates the philosophical texts by the Greeks, okay? And this is something that needs to be emphasized over and over again, so that people take more interest in Hindu philosophy. Another thing is that there's also the term Hindu philosophy in Indian philosophy in the literature have been are usually referring to the same, but you can contest that because the term Indian and Hindu are not necessarily the same, right? So, but academics in the past, they have used Hindu philosophy and renamed as Indian philosophy, Indian as Hindu philosophy, and so on. But nevertheless, we are looking at the texts such as the Upanishads and the Bhagavad Gita. So we need to use the latest language models to study this. And now, unless we read the Upanishads, we do not know what we're talking about. So some famous physicists, scientists around the world have been studying the Upanishads, such as Niels Bohr. I go to the Upanishads to ask questions. If you've done a class in physics, you know who he is. And there's no kind of framework within which we can find consciousness in the plural. This is simply something we construct because of the temporal plurality of individuals, but it's a false construction. The only solution to this conflict, insofar as any is available to us, all lies in the ancient wisdom of the Upanishad. Erwin Schrödinger. And Carl Gustav Jung says, as we study the philosophy of the Upanishad, the impression grows on us that the attainment of this path is not exactly the simplest of tasks. Our Western supercilious in the face of these Indian insights is a mark of our barbarian nature, which has not the remotest working of the extraordinary depth and astonishing psychological accuracy. So Carl Gustav Jung, the father of Western psychology. So selected verses from the Upanishads. What is the cause of the cosmos? Is it Brahman? From where do we come from? By what we live? Where shall we find peace at last? What powers governs the duality of pleasure and pain by which we are driven? Sevasthavara Upanishad. You are what your deep driving desire is. As your desire is, so is your will. As your will is, so is your deed. As your deed is, so is your destiny. Brihandakarmeya Upanishad. And knowledge is twofold, higher and lower. The study of the Vedas, linguistics, rituals, astronomy, and all the arts can be seen called a lower knowledge. The higher is that which leads to self-realization. I'm sorry, according to Mandaka Upanishad, IIT Guwahati mostly is studying the lower language. Sorry about that. But yes, this is what the philosophers back in the days were concerned about. For them, to be an engineer and a scientist was not that important. It was more important to know who you are and understand the human psychology and consciousness. So why do we take this study? Because the Bhagavad Gita in the Upanishads, there's like predates the Bhagavad Gita, and there are 108 Upanishads, of which 12 are prominent Upanishads. And we want to see how much influence the Upanishads had on the Bhagavad Gita. We note that Lord Krishna has made reference in a number of texts that he knows the Vedas. He's the master of the Vedas. The Vedas is basically, the Upanishads are basically seen as the concluding chapters of the Vedas. So he has mastered the Vedas. So of course, when he is going to provide counseling to Arjuna, he's going to use the Upanishads as a reference, right? So we want to see what topics were in the Upanishads and what were in the Bhagavad Gita. And basically this is the framework, and we are comparing LDA, which is the foundation of topic modeling, with the BERT-based language framework, where we take all the PDF files, we do some pre-processing, and there's some document embedding models. Note that in the deep learning or BERT-based framework, we are using the BERT topic extraction pipeline, topic to vector, to basically get our word embeddings. And using those word embeddings, basically we are using the word embeddings, we need to apply different clustering algorithms to actually extract the topics. And before we do, because the word embeddings are very large, we need to use some dimensionality reduction methods such as PCA and UMAP to reduce them. And where does BERT come in? BERT comes in into this phase where you have the topic to vec, and topic to vec uses a neural network, and you can think of the neural network part in topic to vec is the BERT, which is a more advanced, basically deep learning model. So, and then we need to do hierarchical topic reduction. And with this approach, basically, we also, so we looked into the different texts. Bhagavad Gita by Eknath Eshwaran, the Upanishads by Eknath Eshwaran, the 10 principal Upanishads by Sri Purohit Swami and W.P. Yeats, and the 108 Upanishads. The International Gita publication, and it's just from a website. There's not much information, and they say that most of the Upanishads were lost. These guys have uncovered it, but there's not much of background information about how they uncovered it and where it is published, by whom it's published. So this is a challenge, but nevertheless, we take that. So the number of words, documents, and verses are given there. And as you can see, the 108 Upanishads, there's 405,000 or so words compared to the Upanishads, which is just 40,000 words. So it's like 10 times more of the Upanishads. The Upanishads here means the 12 Upanishads, principal Upanishads from the 108. So we process them original to transformed, and we see the different chapters and the number of words. So this is the key Upanishads that we are looking in the first. And then on top is the Bhagavad Gita, the bigrams and the trigrams, the top bigrams and the trigrams of the two texts, the Upanishads and the Bhagavad Gita. And by the same author. So we do not have a translation bias because Eknath Eshwaran translated both the Upanishads and the Bhagavad Gita. If we have two different authors translating it, then there could be a translation bias. So we need to kind of compare and measure the topic coherence, how well the topics are portrayed. So the topic coherence, normalized pointwise mutual information, NPMI, or is a matrix that basically expresses how well the models recover the topics. And it's basically expressing a joint probability and from a set of about top 50 words. And this is the formula for it. And without going much into detail, I'm out of time. We just see some results here of the topic coherence matrix. And we see that we compare LDA, which is the canonical method, topic modeling, with all the 4 different types of methods that we have uncovered or developed, where we use the BERT-based in the beginning, and then you use UMAP with different types of clustering methods. And basically we find that the BERT-based model covers the better topics in the topic coherence matrix. And comparison of dimensionality reduction and visualization by PCA and UMAP. So we see the topics that are overlapping in the Bhagavad Gita and the Upanishads by looking at UMAP embeddings and the PCA embeddings. You can see that PCA is 4.4 explained variance ratio for dimension is 1 and 3.4 dimension 2. And taken from a total of 500 dimensions in the original data, that basically says that it's this visualization is not that accurate, because it's taking only 10% of less than 10% of explained variance ratio, but it just gives us some kind of overview. So the Gita versus the Upanishads, we have these topic IDs uncovered, and then the topics are given there, and how well there's a similarity score between those topic IDs. So most similar topics in the Upanishads versus the topics in the Bhagavad Gita. And based on them, there's this similarity score. So for example, meditation, meditate, spirituality, spiritual, and here meditation, meditating, meditate. And that's topic 4 there, and topic 5 in the Upanishads, a large similarity score of 0.9. So we see that there are certain topics with very high similarity scores and so on. And we can observe that both topics encapsulate similar ideas of death, morality, and immorality. So that's for the 2 different topics in topic 5 about immorality and death, right? So we see this matrix where we see the combinations of how topic 1 and how much of similarity there is for topic 14, this is topic 1 versus topic 9, so you have the topics in the Bhagavad Gita and Upanishads. So you have the Upanishads as on the x-axis and the Bhagavad Gita on the y-axis. So which topics basically correlate higher with the other topics. So with this, you can go back and extract further information such as this to understand more about the different topics. So, and we applied this to 108 Upanishads, and we visualized the major topics. And basically, we see a very high similarity between the topics in this two texts. With the cosine similarity of 73%, find that 14 topics extracted from the Bhagavad Gita, 9 of them have a cosine similarity of more than 70% with the topics of the Upanishads. So there's a lot of overlap of the topics. And the other thing is that we note that there are some things expressed in the Bhagavad Gita which are more unique to the Bhagavad Gita, and the Bhagavad Gita is also known as the Karma Upanishad because the philosophy of karma is mostly central and mostly well explained only in the Bhagavad Gita in that era, from that era of texts. So we also find that the best bird-based models are better than LDA for the topic coherence given based on the topic coherence score. And the visualization of the low-dimensional embeddings of this text show very clear overlapping themes across the various topics. And more work can be done. So we are going to do more work where we are going to review and this we haven't started, but it's in the process. I'm in the process of getting the ethics approval for that. So what we want to see is the topics, the sentiments that were expressed by the language model, how those sentiments actually, how humans see those sentiments. So we are going to give those same translations for the different chapters to a group of students who are studying the Bhagavad Gita. And this is from the Midam Ashram Trust in Pondicherry. And I'm visiting that after next week, And they will basically fill a survey of where they are given all these different translations, and they will say which of the sentiments are being expressed by them. And then we are going to write a paper where we are going to compare the humans, that's the group of students, versus the machine, which is the deep learning model. So that's the man versus machine, and verse by verse translation and so on. So in the process of that. And the other project that it's ongoing now, half done, and this should be out by January or February, at least in archive, will place a paper there. Evaluation of Google Translate. So Google Translate got released released the Sanskrit translator in April this year. So Google Translate has dozens of language, but Sanskrit was just added this year, and we want to see how good is the Sanskrit translator. And this opens us opportunities to evaluate this whole mechanism, the framework opens the opportunity to evaluate any language by Google Translate. Because if you have translations from Hindi, for example, if you want to evaluate how good Hindi is, all you need to do is get some text and give it to the Google Translate, see how it translates that text to English. Then for the same text, whatever other authors have translated, get those translations, and then use this framework to compare them, basically by sentiments or bigrams, trigrams, and topics, and so on. So this is a whole mechanism to evaluate how good a Google Translator is. And there can be a series of projects that we can do together with our two schools from the different universities. So there's all these limitations that I've expressed before. Interpretation of poetry, because songs are translated from ancient languages, and these ancient languages, only a small number of people speak it. And note that the Bhagavad Gita is written in Sanskrit, whereas the Mahabharata is written in a more ancient Sanskrit, so classical to modern Sanskrit. So even Sanskrit is not like we think Sanskrit is like one language. No, Sanskrit has been evolving over time. The Upanishads, the Vedas, and all the Vedic corpus, they took it. They were not, just as they say, Rome was not built in a day. These Hindu texts, they took thousands of years to be written, right? And they were added by a number of philosophers, scientists, academics, including men and women. So back then, you had women academics also writing or contributing to the Vedic literature. So the limitations in terms of Hindi and Sanskrit, because we do not have, like we have bird-based models which are based more on English, maybe we can in the future develop BERT-based models which are based more in Hindi. So we do not need to really translate things into English, but we review the Hindi by itself, in terms of the sentiments expressed. Coherence score validity is also questionable because it's not really, we're not sure how good it is without validating the topics by human experts. So we need to look at that. And collaboration with humanities, due to lack of funding opportunities in research, it's not that promoted in Australia. So those are challenges. Recognition of interdisciplinary humanities research by scientific journals. Where do you publish this type of research, right? So that's why I said I published in IEEE Explore. And the topic modeling was published by PLOS ONE, but it's hard to really convince reviewers at times, because you don't find people who are doing such interdisciplinary research. And of course, being misrepresented as a priest or a theologian when studying philosophy of religion, right? So the current and ongoing work, sentiment and semantic analysis of translations of the Bible and Sermon of the Mount, and thanks to Mahek is here, it's going on. And metaphor detection in religious texts. This is going with the intern Abhishek from IIT Madras. Future Hindu BERT model we want to have, BERT for Hindu philosophy. More evaluation we need to do by Sanskrit experts, and topic modeling and evolution of ancient poetry and songs, humor detection in ancient religious texts, political biases is in media reporting, and the team for the AI and philosophy of religion. Thanks to the team from IIT Guwahati, all these past students, Mukul, Venkatesh, Mahek is currently engaged with the project, and Tom from Saro, who's a good friend of mine, he's part of our Vedanta reading group we have on Saturdays, and where we actually studied these translations, and then that been studying these translations for a couple of years, and then finally we're like, when we're comparing the translations, we're like, since there's difference and similarities, and I'm like, okay, let's use AI to do this, so that's how it started. And Vansh started the work in the Bible studies, and Abhishek Tiwari is doing the other work, metaphor, and Ashu is helping in the Bible translations. Shusharat Bade is, he has translated the Bhagavad Gita into English, preserving the rhythm and the rhyme, so the song structure is maintained. And I'm going to visit him after next week. And Charvi Bansal from Bits Pilani, she is going to complete my project, the project on the Google Translate evaluation of the Bhagavad Gita. So the papers, okay, this is already has appeared, the second one in PLOS ONE. Sorry, did not update it. But there are some other related papers, the sentiment analysis where deep learning in PLOS ONE, and then we have the Biden versus Trump sentiment analysis on the different electoral states of the United States elections. And all of these, the papers, the software, the code and data, everything is on GitHub in this Sydney machine learning repository. So it's very easy for you to, copy, and a number of you guys already know about it since you're doing internships with me. And just want to thank my other IIT Guwahati interns since I'm here, and they are quite busy with their placements. Janavi, Aditi, Snigdha and Shirin, and Omkar is here. Thanks, Omkar and Azal. You guys are doing wonderful job, and please continue. And we really appreciate your input. And past interns from IIT Guwahati, Ashwin Krishna was phenomenal in the earlier work, the COVID-19 sentiment analysis. Konak Jain, I think he was part of the IITG student group. You guys may know him. Actually, when he was setting up the group, he was with me in Sydney as an intern. So he physically came to Sydney, and that is when he was. So I could hear him talking on the phone from time to time and planning the IITG student group then. And Animesh, Renanse, and Tiwari, they are past interns, and they've done really good work. And thanks, Professor Shish Anand. Thank you very much for giving me the chance to come here. Thank you, everyone.
Okay. So questions from students.
What exactly is the polarity of what Krishna said? How do you define some of those? What do you check for polarity?
So the polarity score